Why did the global balance of power change so dramatically in the 20th century? Why did empires that had dominated the world for centuries suddenly fade, while new superpowers rose almost overnight? Wars matter, leaders matter, ideology matters, but none of them explain the shift as deeply as one event. The Great Depression didn't just crash markets. It rewrote how power worked in the world. This is how the Great Depression changed global power forever. Before the Great Depression, the world economy looked stable on the surface. International trade flowed across oceans. Currencies were tied to gold. Financial capitals like London still saw themselves as the center of global money. Empires spanned continents, and the old order seemed intact. But this stability was fragile. World War I had shattered Europe physically and financially. Governments borrowed enormous sums to fight the war, and when it ended, those debts didn't disappear. Britain and France owed vast amounts to the United States. Germany owed massive reparations. Banks, governments, and investors all depended on constant repayment to keep the system alive. Instead of solving these problems, the world delayed them. The global economy after World War I relied on credit rather than real recovery. American banks lent money to Europe. Europe used that money to pay debts and reparations. Confidence kept the system moving, even though its foundations were weak. The United States became the anchor holding everything together. American industry boomed during the 1920s. Factories produced more than ever before. Stock prices soared. Credit was cheap and abundant. As long as the U.S. economy expanded, the world economy stayed afloat. But this growth came with dangerous imbalances. Productivity rose faster than wages. Consumers relied increasingly on debt. Speculation replaced investment. Banks took risks assuming prosperity would never end. When confidence cracked in 1929, it didn't just hurt America. It exposed how dependent the entire world had become on a single economic engine. The stock market crash was only the beginning. As banks failed, credit evaporated, businesses closed, unemployment soared, consumers stopped spending. What could have been a recession became a systemic collapse. Because the global economy was interconnected, the shock spread outward rapidly. American banks recalled loans from Europe. International trade collapsed as countries imposed tariffs and controls to protect themselves. Shipping slowed. Factories shut down. Farmers were ruined. The world economy seized up. But the most important effect of the Great Depression wasn't just economic suffering. It was how unevenly that suffering was distributed, and how it reshaped power. Britain, the world's financial leader for over a century, was hit especially hard. Its economy depended on trade, finance, and global stability. When trade collapsed, Britain's strength collapsed. With it, the British Empire, once a source of wealth, became a liability. Colonies required administration, defense, and subsidies. Maintaining global dominance became too expensive for a weakened economy. Britain abandoned the gold standard and retreated from free trade. These decisions stabilized the economy, but they marked a turning point. Britain was no longer the world's financial anchor. It was adjusting to decline. The Great Depression didn't destroy the British Empire overnight. It made it unaffordable. France faced a similar fate. Economic stagnation weakened political stability. Governments rose and fell rapidly. Long-term planning became impossible. France turned inward, focused on survival rather than leadership. Germany suffered even more dramatically. Already weakened by war reparations and earlier inflation, Germany's economy collapsed under the weight of the Depression. Unemployment soared. Savings disappeared. Businesses failed. Economic desperation destroyed faith in democratic institutions. When people lose jobs, homes, and savings, they stop believing in systems that promise stability but deliver suffering. The Depression created fertile ground for radical movements by making economic pain unavoidable. Germany's collapse didn't just destabilize the country. It reshaped global power by pushing Europe toward conflict, militarization, and eventually war. Across Europe, similar patterns appeared. Governments lost legitimacy. Political extremes gained influence. Cooperation collapsed as countries prioritized survival over stability. While Europe weakened, another power was transforming. The United States suffered deeply during the Great Depression, but its long-term position was fundamentally different. Unlike Europe, it had not been physically destroyed by war. It had vast natural resources, a large internal market, and unmatched industrial capacity. More importantly, the Depression changed how the United States understood economic power. The American response expanded the role of the state in managing the economy. Banking systems were stabilized. Infrastructure projects created employment. Confidence was slowly rebuilt. These policies didn't end the Depression immediately, but they prevented complete collapse. They also transformed the U.S. into a state capable of organizing economic power on an unprecedented scale. When World War II began, this capacity became decisive. The U.S. Economy mobilized with incredible speed. Factories converted to war production. Output surged. Employment returned. By the end of the war, the United States was producing a massive share of the world's goods. Europe, by contrast, emerged exhausted, indebted, and damaged. The Great Depression had already weakened Europe. The war finished the transformation. After 1945, global power rested on economic strength, not imperial tradition. The United States held most of the world's gold reserves. Its currency became the backbone of global trade. Its institutions shaped international finance. The shift was permanent. The Great Depression revealed that modern power depended on economic resilience, the ability to absorb shocks, adapt systems, and mobilize resources. Countries that failed this test lost influence, regardless of their history. The Soviet Union experienced the Depression differently. Because its economy was largely isolated from global markets, it avoided the immediate collapse seen elsewhere. This gave the appearance of stability. Many observers believed central planning had protected the Soviet system, but this insulation came with trade-offs. The Soviet economy prioritized control over efficiency, stability over innovation. While it avoided short-term collapse, it locked itself into long-term stagnation. The Great Depression strengthened the Soviet state politically, but weakened it economically over time. The ideological battle that followed was shaped by this contrast. Capitalism no longer looked invincible. Governments everywhere expanded control. Economic planning, regulation, and intervention became normal. The belief that markets alone could manage crises disappeared. This transformation reshaped global power structures. Colonial empires suffered deeply. Colonies stopped generating profit and became financial burdens. Maintaining control required resources that weakened states could no longer spare. Decolonization accelerated not because empires became kinder, but because they became poorer. The Great Depression taught governments a harsh lesson. Economic collapse reshapes politics faster than ideology, faster than diplomacy, and faster than war alone. It determines which systems survive stress and which break under pressure. By the mid-20th century, the world had been reordered. Britain declined. Europe weakened. The United States dominated. New powers emerged under new economic rules. This wasn't an accident of history. It was the result of an economic shock that exposed structural weaknesses and rewarded adaptability. The Great Depression didn't just change how economies worked. It changed who held power, who lost it, and who would shape the future. Its legacy still defines the modern world. When economies fail, power never stays where it was. And that is how the Great Depression changed global power forever.